All right. So I'd like to start by asking a few questions. By raising your hand, how many people have inherited a troubled project at some point in their career? All right, pretty much everybody. How are we doing in London? Okay, so pretty much everyone. Okay, how many people have inherited more than one trouble project throughout their career? Okay, so about half or so in London, yeah, okay. How many people have been part of a project where it ran into trouble and head office decided they needed to provide some help, or the customer decided their client group, their quality group should step in and provide some help? Anybody been in that quagmire? So I have been in the quagmire, wasn't managing at the time, I was involved from a technical aspect, but it does create a little bit of a political challenge, that's for sure. Right? So, how many people have kids? How many people would be willing to trust their lives of their kids to a complete stranger? But we do every day, right? We get in cars, we drive around, strangers can run over our kids, run into our cars, we take our kids to the doctor. How well do you really know your doctor? What about your kid's teacher, right? In so many ways, we trust each other in society and we don't even realize it, which is a great thing, right? So some of the things we're going to talk today is, how does trust impact performance? We're going to look at the data. Does it really make a difference? There's a lot of talk about trust. Is it just a management fad, or does the data really show that trust makes a difference? Okay? We're going to look at, why do we trust people? What types of attributes and things like that, biological mechanisms promote trust? Okay? We're going to do a bit of a group exercise to explore one of the aspects of trust. We're going to look at different types of relationships we have with people and how that promotes trust. And then we're going to talk about how can we build trust with our stakeholders, with other people, strengthen relationships. Okay? So, organizational trust. Okay? Watson Wyatt in 2002 did a study, and he found that organizations that have a high level of trust within their employees perform 3 times better on returns to shareholders than those with low trust. Pretty good. Okay? How many people saw the social media trailer that we put out for this session? A few? So I inherited a project at one point, my past employer, where the employer had abandoned the project a year earlier. Okay? They just stopped working on the project. Okay? And the only point of contention was, how much should the termination fee be? My ex-employer had one idea, the client had a different idea. They made a very large upfront payment, so they expected a lot of it back. Of course, my employer at the time disagreed. Okay? So I inherited this project to try and figure out, okay, well, what's the right number? How can we come to an agreement? Okay? I sat down with my team, my boss, and we looked at the project and we said, this is actually a really good project. We need to do this project. We should complete this project. We shouldn't walk away from this project. There are many strategic advantages to this project. So we decided that we're going to go to the client and try and convince them that even though it's been radio silence for a year and both our companies are looking to walk away, that we should change that and we should both do this project. So off to the client site we went, and understandably, we took some lashings. We weren't involved in the past behavior, but we were the face of the company, so we took the lashings. And then we pitched the client on restarting the project. And of course, they asked that dreaded question, well, why should it be different this time? Why should we trust you now? Right? And we explained that, well, we can't speak for the past people, but we believe there's a lot of advantages to this project. We've talked with our senior management, we've got buy-in, and we do understand that this would be a leap of faith on your part, but we think this would be good for both our companies. And they agreed, which was fantastic, right? So naturally we had to amend the contract because the project was already a year late. So in an effort to build trust, we said, okay, so if we're them, what do we want to see? So we decided to put milestones in our proposed contract amendment where we would rebate them that upfront fee that they paid us if we didn't meet the milestones. Okay, and it was a portion every time we didn't meet a milestone, right? To our surprise, when we sat down and we negotiated to discuss our proposed contract amendment, they said, no, milestones are great, but it's very difficult to measure those types of things, and it can drive somewhat destructive behavior. So we trust you now. So we would actually like you to remove those milestones. One milestone at the end is all that's necessary. We're happy with that. If at the end you haven't met the commitment, then we'll take the money, which is fantastic. In 4 short weeks, we've gone from 2 people who were ready to go to court to battle it out for an undetermined settlement to the client saying, no, you know what? I don't need extra precautions. I trust you now, right? That's what we want to build. We want to build those kind of strong relationships, right? It's what allows us to be efficient, right? So when we talk about how does organizational trust play in this, when you have that organizational trust with you and your client, it allows you to operate more efficiently, right? They ask questions. They don't need all the safeguards. Okay? There's a lot of time and effort put into safeguards when there isn't organizational trust. Okay? What about personally? Okay? From a personal standpoint, are there benefits to you being a high trust individual or being seen as a high trust individual? The data shows that you tend to be promoted faster. You tend to make more money. Both of those are likely a result of you having access to better opportunities. But most interestingly enough, you have some social benefits. Okay? You tend to develop stronger emotional and social ties with your coworkers and within your family. Okay? And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Okay? So, has anybody read The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg? No? It's a great book. If you have a chance to read it, I highly recommend it. It talks about how the brain functions and how habits are built and how habits are changed. So if you're looking to change your own habits or that of your teams, having an understanding of those mechanisms is an absolutely fantastic thing. Okay? In the book, one of the things Charles talks about is Paul O'Neill took over Alcoa. Okay? For those of you who don't know Alcoa, Alcoa is the 6th largest aluminum producer in the world. Okay? In 1987, he took over Alcoa, and he started out, of course, by going in front of major investors and analysts and talking to them. Okay? And the way this usually happens is, you know, the new CEO gets up on stage and he says, "Thank you very much for coming. I'm very excited to be here. I'm going to cut costs, increase revenue, increase profits." Okay? That's what they all expect to hear. Okay? But that's not what Paul did. Okay? Paul walked up on stage. He said, "Thank you very much for coming. Our most important thing we need to do at Alcoa is improve worker safety. Thank you very much." Wall Street was floored. Right? Not at all what they were expecting. Worker safety? Really? Come on. We care about profits. Right? But it turned out okay. In Paul's tenure, he increased net income by a factor of 5. Okay? He increased Alcoa's market cap by $27 billion. And he improved worker safety by reducing incidents by 90%. Okay? To me, this is about trust. When you say to your staff that your safety is important to me, and I understand you're entrusting your life to me, because producing aluminum is a very hazardous job, can be a very hazardous job, right? You're saying, I accept the trust you're placing in me, and I will be trustworthy for you. I will look after your best interests. Okay? And it's amazing what happens, because as soon as you do that, they start to reciprocate. They start to look after your best interests. All of a sudden, you're standing shoulder to shoulder looking at problems. It's not them versus you, it's now us. How do we succeed? These are our jobs too, right? And it completely changes the conversation. So, why do we trust? What type of mechanisms factor into how we build trust? Okay? Well, it turns out there was a study done by a gentleman by the name of Paul Zak. Okay? And in 2001, he was wondering whether or not there were some biological mechanisms that fit into this. And he developed a protocol to extract blood so that it could be tested. And they would extract blood from people right before they needed to make a decision about trust and immediately following a decision about trust. Okay? And they extracted it from two groups. They extracted it from people who were making decisions to trust others, and they also extracted blood from people who were making decisions whether or not to be trustworthy when other people trusted them. Okay? And it turns out that your body actually produces a hormone called oxytocin. Okay? And when you make these types of trusting decisions, whether you're trusting somebody else or you're deciding to be trustworthy, okay, your body produces this hormone. And there are many benefits. Okay? It's called the social hormone, but you develop stronger relationships, you have less stress, you sleep better. Okay? There are many other benefits which I won't go into. But what they found was that we are biologically wired to trust others, which sort of makes sense over time that society would, or that biology would choose those who work well in society, right? Because we're stronger together. But it's interesting that there are biological reinforcements for that, okay? Predictable behavior, right? Most of us would have no problem renting a car in North America, right? We understand the rules of the road. But would you rent a car in Mexico and drive around Mexico, or Colombia, or various countries in Africa? Maybe a little less so, right? I spent 18 months working in Mexico City. The rules of the road are more like suggestions, right? So, you know, red light, yeah, maybe slow down. So yeah, predictable behavior. And this is to me one of the reasons why well-written contracts makes it easy to execute programs, because both sides know how the other side is going to perform. They've already agreed in advance what the acceptable behavior will be, right? So I always get concerned when people say, oh, you know what, ambiguous contracts, that gives us room to move around. Well, it also means that the other people have no idea what to expect. So it's hard to build trust, right? Low perceived risk, okay? It's easy to trust someone when there isn't a lot at stake, right? How many people play the lottery? It's okay. I play the lottery once in a while, right? Lotto max is, I don't know, 60 million or 20 max millions or something, right? But we tend to become desensitized to risk over time, right? So you play the lottery. Did you know that the likelihood of you winning the lottery is the same as the likelihood of you dying 4,500 times in a car crash? In order to get to the lottery, you'd have to have died 4,500 times in a car crash. But we don't think about hopping in our car and driving down the street, right? We've become desensitized to that risk, right? Yeah, it's low, but we play the lottery expecting to win, and it's way higher than that, right? So the other thing is herd mentality, right? Anybody own cryptocurrencies? So if you don't understand things, but you see other people jumping into them, sometimes we will just blindly trust. Well, it's good enough for them, I trust them, therefore I trust this, right? And I'm not saying cryptocurrencies are bad, so let's not start that debate. You know, there are lots of interesting things, but I think that a lot of people involved in cryptocurrencies don't understand them, right? They're just in it for the ride, okay? So, we've all heard this saying, trust takes years to build and seconds to destroy. I wholeheartedly agree with this, but I also think it's driven by negative behavior, okay? So you destroy it not because bad things happen, but because of how you react to bad things happening, right? How many people have worked on a project where there was a very large liquidated damage, and somebody said, I know that we're off plan, but we're not going to tell anybody we're off plan, because then we incur the liquidated damage. We're going to wait for somebody else to screw up, and hopefully they screw up before us. Anybody been in that situation? Yep, a couple people? Yep. I was in that situation earlier. I wasn't, fortunately, managing the situation. It was earlier in my career, but you know, that's never fun. Okay, and we talk about risk a little bit, right? And unfortunately, the reality is that large deterrents or large rewards tend to actually drive negative behavior. It tends to cause us to take on excess risk, which is counterintuitive to trust, right? Because when you're taking on more risk and you're not being transparent about it, it doesn't build trust, right? How many people have seen Tom Wujcik's video about the Marshmallow Challenge? No? If you have 7 minutes you're looking to spare, I highly recommend it, okay? Fantastic video, talks about group dynamics, okay? Tom Wujcik, he has a exercise that he runs called the Marshmallow Challenge, where you're given spaghetti and string and tape and a large marshmallow. And the goal is that you break into groups and you see who can get the marshmallow the highest off the table, okay? And his video, he's executed this exercise hundreds of times, and his video talks about different group dynamics and how the performance changes in different groups, okay? So one of the things he talks about is, in America we have this belief where if you increase the risk, you can increase performance. Or sorry, if you increase the reward, you can increase performance, right? The higher the performance reward, the higher the performance you're gonna get, right? So just for fun, he decided he was gonna try this, okay? So he went into one of his sessions and he said, all right, I'm gonna give $10,000 worth of free software to whoever wins. Okay, now there's normally a distribution, right? When he normally executes this, he has some people who do well, he has some groups that do average, which is where most of the groups are, and then he has some that completely fail. Okay, so you would think that $10,000 worth of free software, probably related to the people who were doing the exercise, right? So if it's engineers, it would be some sort of engineering software. If it's business people, it would be some sort of business software, right? That's a pretty big incentive. We would expect what? The whole curve to move up based on the idea that the bigger the reward, the bigger the performance is going to be. 100% of the groups failed. Had you dumped the spaghetti onto the table and placed the marshmallow on top of the spaghetti lying on the table, you would have won. Why? Because there was a huge performance incentive that resulted in huge risk-taking, right? Everybody waited until the last minute to put their marshmallow on top, at which point their tower fell over, right? This idea of huge penalties or huge risks or huge rewards really drives negative behavior, right? A lot of risk-taking, which is not good for building trust, okay? So, systematic error, okay? This is a concept in communication, but I feel it applies here. It's where we take behavior that we observe and we associate it with a character trait, okay? Oh, you know, that person's untrustworthy because I saw them do this. Or, oh, that person's a bad communicator because I saw them do this. Or I can't work with them because they're difficult because they did this, okay? I want to do an exercise, so I need 4 volunteers, okay? Preferably people who don't know each other. Can I have 4 volunteers? I promise I won't bite. Sure. Yep, yep. Okay, perfect. We're going to steal that mic. You want to grab the mic on the way back? Okay, so what we want to do is we want to throw this ball, one of these balls, from one person to the other person, and have the other person catch it. And if you successfully do that, I'll give each of you a $5 Tim card. Okay? So, I'm sorry.
Apollonia.
Apollonia, Fike, Ira, and
David.
David. Okay, so we're going to start with the 2. If you guys could just step back for a minute. Okay, so are you going to be the thrower?
Sure.
Okay. Do you know Fike?
No.
Okay, so how much do you trust Fike at this point? You think he's going to catch it for you?
There's incentive.
There's incentive, yeah. Do you think he's going to perform?
I can see it in his eyes. I trust him.
Yeah. On a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you trust him?
8.5.
8.5. Wow, that's a lot of trust. All right. Fike, how much do you trust
Apollonia.
Apollonia?
Like 80%?
80%? So on a scale of 1 to 5, about a 4?
Yeah, 4. Like,
Okay. So what I need to do is step over there. Now, Fike here, I think he's got a lot of potential as his boss. You know, I think there's so much opportunity for him. He's an up-and-coming star. I'm really looking out for him, and I know this is an important handoff that's going to occur here, okay? But, you know, I'm going to give him some special instructions because, you know what? I think he deserves to be taken care of. So if you could just read those, okay? This is just between me and you. It's not for you to share anywhere else, okay? But if you could just read that, that'd be great.
Now there's secrets. See, now secrets. You know, don't make me question anymore.
Oh, but he's such a trustworthy guy, and I really like him. Okay, so that's just between you and me, and you can do whatever you think is right for you. Okay, if you want to follow that, and you know whatever benefits come of it, so be it. Are you good? Do you have questions?
No.
No? Okay. So, I have a question. Do you feel you can trust Mike as much as you did before? Is it still 80%, or is it still an 8 out of 5? Or has it changed?
Sorry, I was just hearing 10 in my mind. It's gone down a bit.
Yeah.
Mentioned that, just
Yeah.
by the look in
What
his
do you think?
eyebrows. Okay, they're going out of 5, now it's down to a 3.
Down to a 3? Oh, okay. All right.
So 60%.
Has your perception of Apollonia changed? Do you think she's going to perform differently now? Do you think she's going to throw you the ball in a way that you're going to be able to catch it?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
You still have confidence? It's still a 4 out of 5?
Yeah.
Yeah? All right, perfect. I'm going to take that. Okay, well, let's let her rip. You can just take one more step back.
How many attempts do I get?
One, only one. This is the critical handoff. Oh, that really is unfortunate. Well, you know, I'm sure you did your best though, because I really trust you. So, how about, do you think he did his best?
It looked like he did.
Yeah? But you're skeptical?
No,
Wasn't that hard?
I see, I'm a person who has a rosy outlook,
Yeah?
so I'm going to say it was just greasy hands.
Okay. Oh, I commend you. Okay, so I'm just going to get you to step off to the side, and we're going to get our next group in here. Okay? How are you, Ira?
Very well.
That's good. So, how much do you trust David over there? Is he going to be able to catch it?
I'm hoping he can catch it.
You're hoping he can catch it? You really want those tin cards, eh?
I want that to
Okay, so if you were to rate how much you trust him on a scale of 1 to 5, what would it be?
I'll give him a 4.
You're going to give him a
I'm gonna
4?
give him a 4.
Okay, and David, what would you rate Ira?
I'd rate him as a 4 as well. Just, you know, seems like a
Yeah?
pretty good starting point.
All right. So I also have a lot of respect for you. I think you're going to do great, and I'm looking out for you. And you know, I'm sure Ira's going to do a great job at throwing it, but I also have an envelope for you too. Okay. So, but the rules here are a little bit different. Okay. We're going to promote transparency, so you're welcome to share our little secret with Ira. Okay. And if that then changes how you guys want to behave, then so be it.
I have a choice to share it or not.
Well, no, you
I
have to
will
share it. Sort of like the old Model T. It comes in any color as long as it's black. Is it that poorly worded?
The same look that he gave me, the eyebrows kept going up.
Are we good?
I
No,
think so.
you can't tell the audience yet. You just got to do it.
Okay.
So go ahead and talk with
Okay.
Ira.
So I.
No.
Oh.
Just talk with Ira.
Oh,
Oh. Oh, I don't want to tell the audience.
No.
Okay.
No.
No, I think we got it.
Okay. Are we good?
I think we're good.
Yeah, we're good.
All right. So let's see if this handoff goes any better than the last one. I can do that. Well,
Okay.
clearly there's room for improvement.
Yes.
Okay, so
More training.
to me, this is all about transparency, right? And the role transparency plays in trust. Okay? So this was the special instructions that each of the catchers were given. They were both given the same instructions. Okay? If you fail to catch the ball in a spectacular fashion, in such a way that the audience believes you were truly trying, you win. No. The thrower will get twice the reward.
Whoa.
Okay? So they were actually acting in the best interests of the other person, but the other person didn't know that. Right? Did you assume that they were acting in your best interests?
I didn't really.
Contemplate it?
No, I didn't contemplate
Right.
that one.
Right. We often fall into the trap that when we don't have information, we're assuming that we're the ones being penalized. Right? And this is why it's important for us to be transparent. Even when we're acting in the other person's best interests, if they don't know we're acting in the other person's best interests, they're going to make assumptions, and they'll probably not be positive ones. Okay? So, here are the Tim cards. You get 3. I don't know what your deal was with Dave, whether or not you were going to share them. You got 1.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, you guys can sit down.
Thank you.
You did such a good job.
Okay, good job.
That's to pay for your training.
Come on, follow me.
Oh. Where's my Tim card? Thank you. I had to grease the balls before I started. Okay, so, common assumptions. We're all program managers, or project managers, or want to be, and we all love it when projects go exactly to plan, right? But do they ever really go exactly to plan? So, let's say, I guess the question I want to ask is, who does senior management trust more? Okay? The project manager who always goes to exactly the plan. Let's call it the project god. Okay? Whatever they plan, that's exactly how it unfolds. Nothing ever goes off the rails. It works perfectly. Right? Or a more human project manager where, you know what, they try real hard. Most of the time it works out just fine. But every once in a while there's something that goes off the rails. They're transparent about it. They get it back on the rails and life goes on. Right? So which one is it that senior management actually trusts more?
Second.
Why?
They're transparent.
They're transparent? Yeah. In my experience, it's not the project god. Okay? They look at the project god and they say, you've sandbagged the schedule, you're burning resources unnecessarily because that's the only way you could accommodate any variation, right? And I don't know how you respond when things go off the rails. So if things were to deviate so much from plan that you had to get involved, I don't know, I can't predict your performance, right? Whereas the more human project manager over here, which we often think, oh, you know, we're losing trust because it doesn't always go to plan, but that's not the case, right? When you step up and you act and you take responsibility, you build trust, right? Okay, so who do we typically trust, right? If you think about different groups of people or different types of situations, we often trust the people we know because we can predict their behavior, right? We have seen them in a variety of situations and we know how they're going to react, right? We trust experts, whether it's lawyers, accountants, engineers, project managers, doctors, right? But the really interesting thing about experts is you can only really evaluate an expert if you are an expert in that field, right? You can't look at a nuclear engineer and say, oh, you know what, you're a good nuclear engineer if you know nothing about nuclear engineering, right? Same thing with brain surgery, right? Or aeronautical engineering, right? So it's interesting that we trust these experts, but we have no real mechanism to evaluate them. We rely on their associations to ensure that they're doing a good job at filtering out bad ones and enforcing the ethics rules and making sure that the public is dealt with in an appropriate fashion, right? Who else do we trust? We tend to trust people or give people an above average amount of input into our process with those who we have something in common with. Have you ever noticed when you go into a store and you start talking to a salesperson and all of a sudden you find out that, oh, you both like the Blue Jays, or oh, you both have kids, or all of a sudden there's some common trait? Their input starts to have a larger influence on your buying decision, right? Same thing at work, right? So, how can we build stronger relationships? So, one of the things we can do is we can find commonalities, right? And this is one of the things that frustrates me a little bit because I go into meetings or I arrive early at meetings and I find everybody tapping away on their BlackBerry or their smartphone or their iPhone, right? They're checking email, they're checking their social feed, they're checking their stocks, they're not talking to each other, right? If you want to build trust, put the smartphones down and talk to each other. Set the goal of trying to learn something new about every other person in the room, right? So, high sensory communication, okay? Those of you who have kids, you'll know that when something goes wrong, they leave you a note and they hide in the room, right? When there's a problem, don't send an email. Go talk to somebody, right? Call them, call the customer, say, hey, this is what's going on. I've just become aware of this. This is what I'm doing about it. I wanted to let you know this is going to be the impact. Is there anything else that I can be doing to minimize the pain, reduce the implications, whatever the case is? Do you have questions? Right? Walk down to your boss, your stakeholder's office, your boss's office, right? But don't only do this when there are problems. Otherwise, whenever the phone rings or you show up at their door, they're going to assume there's a problem, right? Build relationships, okay? Spend some of your time sending emails because it's efficient, but always make sure you spend some of your time going and talking to people, right? In person, on the phone, okay? Share information broadly. Okay, we saw earlier what trust does in an environment. If people don't understand the motivating factors or the constraints you're working within, okay? Steward others' interests. When you look out for somebody else's interests, like our example of Paul O'Neill looking out for his employees, they will tend to look out for you. They will start to trust you, okay? Work together, share the pains, share the proceeds, right? I had a situation where I was responsible for a contract where the customer could buy any number of units, and it was set in the contract what the price would be, and all of a sudden one of the parts that were used to make the product went on allocation. If you're not familiar what allocation is, that's when the manufacturer that's making the parts all of a sudden decides to cap what they're making and assign parts of their production to different people in the industry. So all of a sudden you may have asked for 100 and you only get 50. You may have asked for 100 next week and you'll get 50 3 months from now. Okay? And if you have to continue production for your part, then you're out searching in the market to try and buy up other people's excess stock. And when they know it's on allocation, they're charging a significant premium. So we had a part that went from being a $10 part to a $1,000 part. Okay? It's a fixed contract. We were only making a very narrow margin because it was a long-term contract. We had no mechanism to recoup this, right? So we went to the customer and said, look, this is what's going on. Want you to be aware of it. Fortunately, they also used similar types of parts, which were also on allocation, so they were familiar with the challenges in the industry. And they said, okay, yeah, we're experiencing the same problem. You know what? Let's look at what you can get your hands on in the short term at a reasonable price, and we'll see what we can do to push the orders out with our customers so that we minimize the impact to you, right? Talk to people. Explain the situation. More often than not, they will be receptive. Okay? So I recently was given the opportunity to move from a contract that I've been working with for a little over 2 years now into a different role. Okay? And I've worked hard to build a relationship with everybody on this contract. You know, I do have to give them a fair bit of bad news being the primary point of contact, but you know, I always try and focus on meeting their needs. Okay? So I now have to introduce somebody new into this process. So how do I do that? Do I just start including them on emails, because most of the communication is by email? Do I send out an email to everyone in the group saying, hey guys, just want to let you know that Justin's going to be taking over? Because when you're the customer and you get that email, you have all sorts of questions and concerns, right? So what I did was I called the stakeholders who I deal with on a day-to-day basis and said, look, this is what's going on. I'm going to be stepping out of the role. There's going to be a long transition period, but I want to start including Justin on the emails and the communication traffic so that he can come up to speed. What questions do you have? Do you have any concerns? I will still be around within the company to answer any questions you have, to provide long-term support if you need it, because I've got all the history, but I wanted to let you know personally before I sent out the email. Okay? How do you think that went over? Did that build trust? This is one of the emails I got back, which is a little small. So it says, just wanted to send a personal thank you for all of your expert support. You have been terrific. That's pretty nice. I like that. And this was one of their stakeholders. So I got this email and I got a call from their two primary stakeholders saying thank you, right? Which is great. But to me, what's even better, okay, is when I actually sent the email out to introduce Justin to the team. Their team members, and I apologize for all the redacted, but it's all confidential who the parties are. Their team members sent emails to Justin to say, hey Justin, welcome to the group. We're excited to have you as part of the group. This is my role, the person who's sending the email, and I look forward to working with you. That is awesome. I love the fact that this is the type of relationship I've been able to build, or we've been able to build with this client. That they are so enthusiastic about working with our company that they welcome newcomers with open arms because they believe everybody will take care of them, right? Now, to me, it's easy because all the customers I work with are amazing. I have yet to work with, okay, maybe once. Outside of one time, every customer I've ever worked with in my entire life is perfectly reasonable as long as you deal with them fairly, right? Which is fantastic. I guess I'm very blessed. Okay, so the theory of reciprocity, okay? The idea of fairness, do unto others as you have them do unto you, is recognized in at least 22 religions around the world. And if you look at the number of followers who participate in those religions, it makes up more than half of the global population. Okay? So the theory of reciprocity, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? Odds are the people you're interacting with on a day-to-day basis buy into it to some regard, right? Whenever you're looking at a situation, think about it. How would I want them to deal with it? Right? We talk about these large liquidated damages payments, and yes, they will be there from time to time, but anytime you have an opportunity to either not put them in the contract in the first place, or have an opportunity to get them out of a contract, or out of a stakeholder agreement, do it. Because it drives negative behavior. Oh, thank you. That was the point I was trying to make with the systematic error. Right? Most of the situations that drive behavior is not character flaws, it's environment. Okay? So anytime you can control your environment, you can set yourself up to be more trustworthy, and you can set your teams up to be more trustworthy. But you have to do it consciously. So, unfortunately we're covered by the top, but we are going to be having a trust workshop, which is a smaller group, a more intimate group for people to ask questions, learn a little bit more. There will be a few more exercises. And we do want to have some individual conversations about the challenges you find yourself in and talk about what types of tactics or what types of tools you could use to help strengthen the relationships in those conversations. Okay, so that will be June 23rd. And I understand registration will be opening in the next week or two, okay, through PMI. All right? And as Hadir mentioned at the beginning, I have a leadership course that I've put together. I think the world needs more leaders, and anything I can do to help make that happen is good. Everybody who came to the session, I'm happy to provide free access to the course. The free access will provide you 10 weeks of access, and there will be 9 modules that you'll have access to. Okay? And that information will conveniently be included in the email that Adair is going to send out with the survey. So don't forget to do the survey. Don't delete the email. All right? So thank you very much for your time. What questions do you have? Yep.
Let me share something. It's not a question actually.
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to give you the mic so everybody can hear. Where's the mic? Oh, there it is.
Thank you very much. Well, I would like to share, like in correlation with establishing the trust in organization,
Yep.
I can recall an H3 connection. H3 connection goes to hearts, head, and hand.
Oh, okay.
And what I would like to say is that in establishing a relationship among team members, you can't go straight to the head.
Right.
You can't have a headshot. First, you have to go to the heart.
Yep.
After a heart, you can go to the head. And then when you go to the head, they will put their hands in, and they can help you with it with a proper execution.
That's a great analogy. Thank you.
Yeah,
I
thanks.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions or comments?
We but we today will take for us. So if anybody has some
I think that you're
Just let them know they can
Okay.
ask questions also.
All right. Sorry, there was a comment or question over here. Could we get the mic?
question,
What would you say probably is the biggest challenge in getting people to buy in with your, I guess your message?
The biggest challenge. Well, that would depend, I think, from what group they come from. One of the groups I find most challenging is legal, because of course legal is all about limiting risk, right? And anything, trust is often extending yourself a little bit, and legal sometimes struggles with that. So I would say that is usually the biggest challenge, is that you're trying to simultaneously manage the risk that you could potentially expose yourself to by extending trust, and extending trust in whatever comes of it. And that's why it's important to try and get a feel for who you're interacting with, because there may be some clients, I can't imagine what it might be like to work with Donald Trump, who, I just don't know that you could predict what his performance will be, right? So whether or not you choose to extend trust in those situations where you could potentially be taking on a more legal liability, I talked about the large liquidated damages, right? Whether or not you can stomach that and understand that, yeah, there is a chance that this may backfire, right? So you have to balance that. And I don't have that's a personal risk that you're taking, and you have to decide where you're comfortable with it, right? But in my experience, anytime you work to build trust with individuals, it pays off in dividends. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Other questions? All right. Thank you very much.